Imagine a reality where absolutely everything you have ever known, every sweeping galaxy, towering nebula, and shimmering ocean, is crushed into a physical space far smaller than a single grain of sand. This cosmic structure was not a tiny speck floating in a pre-existing vast void, but the entire sum of existence vibrating with an impossible, breathtaking tension. It was the ultimate tightly coiled seed of reality, a microscopic prison holding the total potential for billions of future worlds. Surprisingly, the magnificent rushing expansion that followed this state did not immediately bathe the cosmos in brilliant light, but instead ushered in hundreds of millions of years of profound starless serenity. If we were to look closer at this quiet era, we would see no fiery suns or colourful galaxies, only an endless, transparent ocean of dark gas slowly preparing for the dawn. The universe was simply taking a deep, restful breath, gathering the immense, silent strength required to eventually forge the heavens. Picture our current reality, resting perfectly and comfortably halfway between that chaotic, fiery birth and the distant, deeply frozen future of a cooling void. We're currently living in the ultimate, radiant sweet spot of cosmic time, an exceptionally privileged moment characterized by total, vibrant balance. The skies are actively ablaze with mature burning stars, yet the relentless expansion still provides enough structural stability for life to safely look upward and wonder at the deep. This grand and sprawling epic is not something to fear or be overwhelmed by, but a beautiful historical map that actively cradles you in the quiet of the present moment. You are safe, securely anchored to a world that was patiently built for you over 14 billion years of majestic evolution. The room around you is completely still, the air is calm, and these ancient, staggering wonders are yours to inherit as you sleep. Let the immense, unimaginable scale of the expanding cosmos gently wash away the tiny, fleeting burdens of the waking day, allowing your mind to drift effortlessly backward. Every ancient star and every quiet shadow in the night sky is now preparing to smoothly guide you into a state of absolute total rest. Deep within the earliest moment, before the ticking of clocks or the vastness of empty voids, the entire observable universe existed in a state of incomprehensible intimacy. Deep within the earliest moment, before the ticking of clocks or the vastness of empty voids, the entire observable universe existed in a state of incomprehensible intimacy. All the sweeping galaxies, towering nebulae, and shimmering oceans we now know were compacted into a space far smaller than a single, microscopic grain of sand. This was not a grain resting on a beach, but a solitary point of infinite density holding the breathtaking weight of absolutely everything. There was no outside, no surrounding emptiness to observe this impossibly heavy speck, for space itself was entirely confined within its microscopic boundaries. The sensation of this primordial state was one of ultimate concentration, an unimaginably tight singularity where every fundamental particle was pressed into absolute unity. Nothing had yet been separated, and the sheer tension of this confined existence practically vibrated with the silent promise of a magnificent awakening. This profound, crushing density defies our modern understanding of physical limits, representing a moment where the laws of nature as we comprehend them had not yet been written. It was the ultimate seed of reality, waiting patiently in the absolute dark to bloom into the sprawling cosmos we gaze at today. This cosmic structure, though invisible to any hypothetical eye, was far from an empty or meaningless anomaly. It contained the complete, unadulterated potential for every brilliant star that would ever ignite, and every frozen moon that would ever drift through the dark. The raw materials for towering mountain ranges, vast swirling atmospheres, and deep, shimmering oceans were all locked within this single, vibrating speck of ultimate possibility. If we were to look closer, we would not find actual rocks or droplets of water, but rather the pure, undifferentiated energy required to eventually forge them. It was a perfectly compressed blueprint of reality, a tight knot of existence holding the total sum of all future mass and light. The sheer magnitude of this hidden promise is staggering, containing the exact recipe for billions of galaxies within a completely dimensionless prison. Every single atom that now constitutes your body, along with the very earth beneath your feet, traces its direct origin back to this solitary vibrating point of origin. It was a localized reservoir of infinite capability, resting quietly in a state of extreme anticipation before the grand release. The entirety of cosmic history was beautifully coiled and ready to unfurl. Suddenly, without any warning or external trigger, this impossibly dense singularity underwent a breathtaking transformation that changed the fabric of reality forever. Space itself began to stretch outwards in a violently rapid expansion, completely shattering the microscopic boundaries that had confined the primordial energy. This monumental event, beautifully known to modern science as cosmic inflation, was not an explosion of matter into a pre-existing room, but the explosive growth of the room itself. The sheer speed of this initial stretching is deeply difficult to comprehend, unfolding in a fraction of a single second. Within that fleeting microscopic sliver of time, the incredibly tight fabric of the universe ballooned outwards by a factor that defies all human logic. A space smaller than a proton was instantly violently torn into a macroscopic expanse, carrying all the raw energy of creation effortlessly along with it. Notice how this rapid ballooning gracefully smoothed out any microscopic wrinkles or irregularities, ensuring the massive cosmos would one day appear incredibly uniform on a grand scale. The once cramped singularity was now a vast stretching canvas, fundamentally setting the ultimate stage for the grandest physical theatre imaginable. Space had been born, and it was racing outward with an unstoppable silent fury. Surprisingly, the universe did not erupt like a grand firework exploding into a vast, dark and empty sky. A common misconception paints the Big Bang as a localized detonation, throwing shrapnel outward from a central point of origin into an endless void. In reality, there was no void waiting patiently to be filled, and absolutely no edge to the brilliant expansion that was currently underway. This fundamental realization forces us to abandon the idea of a central explosion and embrace the strange truth of a uniformly expanding reality. The sensation was less like a violent blast and much more like the rapid, unstoppable unfolding of a heavy warm blanket. Every single microscopic location was expanding equally, meaning the brilliant center of the universe was quite literally everywhere at the exact same time. At this monumental moment, a brand new dimension awakened alongside the violently expanding expanse of physical space. Time itself began its relentless one-way forward march, acting as the invisible river that would proudly carry the universe through its countless future eras. Before this singular awakening, the very concepts of before and after held absolutely no physical or mathematical meaning in the tightly compressed singularity. The birth of time provided the fundamental canvas upon which the entire sprawling epic of cosmic history would eventually be carefully painted. It established a strict, unbreakable sequence of cause and effect, allowing the chaotic, swirling energy to eventually cool, structure itself, and evolve. Without this steadily ticking clock, the universe would have remained frozen in a state of static, unchanging potential, entirely devoid of narrative or progress. Envision this newly born dimension as a steady rhythmic heartbeat, permanently driving the cosmos forward through the dark. Every subsequent collision of particles, every ignition of a newborn star, and every slow dance of merging galaxies would entirely depend on this forward flow. The great clock had finally been wound, and its first silent tick echoed across the rapidly expanding entirety of existence. Picture a thick, infinitely long rubber band being pulled taut by invisible, incredibly powerful hands from every conceivable direction. As the material stretches, any tiny marks or specks drawn upon its surface are steadily drawn further and further apart. This elegant visual perfectly captures the fundamental nature of the expanding cosmos, where the underlying fabric of reality itself is the medium undergoing the immense stretching. The raw, glowing energy filling the early universe was carried effortlessly along by this graceful expansion, entirely trapped within the ballooning architecture of space. It was not physically moving through the void, but rather the physical distances between the pockets of energy were simply multiplying. This allowed the universe to grow at an astonishing rate, without violating the strict fundamental speed limits that govern moving objects. The sensation is one of being anchored to a floor that is constantly, smoothly sliding outward in a silent, continuous motion. Everything within this newly born realm was swept up in the majestic, unstoppable tide of cosmic inflation. The stretching was absolute, ensuring that the heavy, warm closeness of the primordial singularity was quickly replaced by an increasingly vast open arena. Uniquely, the most energetic and violent event in the history of reality occurred in a state of absolute profound silence. No deafening roar or tremendous crash accompanied this magnificent birth, despite the unimaginable amount of sheer force and energy being furiously unleashed. Sound inherently requires a structured medium, like a dense atmosphere or a pool of liquid, for its pressure waves to physically travel and reverberate. In these earliest, fleeting fractions of a second, atoms and molecules had simply not yet been forged by the cooling fires of creation. The rapidly expanding universe was a chaotic, unstructured ocean of pure energy and isolated fundamental particles, entirely incapable of carrying a single echoing note. If an immortal observer had somehow been present, they would have been met with an eerie, total quiet as the physical universe violently tore itself into existence. This deep, silent expansion perfectly emphasizes the alien, unfamiliar nature of the cosmic dawn, far removed from the noisy explosions of our modern world. It was a purely mathematical and physical unfolding, a stunning visual spectacle completely devoid of any accompanying auditory drama. The vast room of the universe was growing incredibly large, but it remained entirely hauntingly mute. Deeply entwined with this profound silence was a level of thermal energy that simply defies all natural human comprehension. The temperature in this primordial, rapidly expanding state was intensely, blindingly hot, far exceeding the nuclear furnace burning at the core of any future sun. We're not speaking of thousands or even millions of degrees, but temperatures so severe that the standard laws of thermodynamics begin to break down entirely. This was a blistering, radiant heat, fueled by the immense density of the newborn universe, where particles smashed into one another with furious, inescapable momentum. The sensation of this environment would be less like standing near a fire and more like being immersed directly into a bath of pure, concentrated lightning. This extreme heat actively prevented any permanent bonds from forming, constantly violently tearing apart any particles that attempted to temporarily join together. Only through the continued relentless expansion of space could this suffocating, intense cosmic fever eventually begin to properly break. For now, the universe was a terrifyingly brilliant, sweltering cauldron of raw, unbridled energy radiating throughout the newly created expanse. The foundational fires of creation were burning at their absolute, undisputed maximum intensity. Within this blistering, unimaginable heat, the intricate rules that currently dictate the behavior of our world were entirely unrecognizable. The fundamental forces of nature, specifically gravity, electromagnetism, and the strong and weak nuclear forces, were entirely stripped of their distinct, individual identities. They were temporarily united as a single, perfectly elegant rule of physics, operating in a state of beautiful, high-energy symmetry. Imagine a pristine crystal of ice melting into a pool of water, losing its complex structure to become a simpler, uniform liquid. In a remarkably similar fashion, The extreme temperatures of the Big Bang melted the distinct physical forces into one unified master framework. Gravity was indistinguishable from the force that holds magnets together or binds atomic nuclei, acting as a singular ultimate power governing the glowing expanse. As the universe eventually expanded and its intense fever began to drop, this perfect primordial symmetry would inevitably shatter. The forces would cleanly separate, claiming their unique familiar roles and permanently setting the rigid physical laws of the modern cosmos. However, during these first glorious moments, reality operated under one supreme, undivided law of pure, concentrated unity. Eventually, the violent, almost incomprehensible speed of the initial cosmic inflation gracefully began to run out of its explosive momentum. As the aggressive stretching slowed its frantic, tearing pace, the newborn cosmos settled into a much steadier, highly majestic pattern of continuous growth. The wild, fiery urgency of the first fraction of a second gave way to a patient, enduring expansion that still actively shapes our reality today. The universe had successfully transitioned from an impossibly tight, microscopic singularity into a vast, glowing and rapidly cooling arena of boundless potential. This steadying of the cosmic pace provided the necessary stable environment for the pure energy to begin slowly crystallizing into the very first physical matter. The infinitely dense, warm room had been fully constructed, successfully opening its expansive doors to the long, beautiful eons of cosmic history to come. We are currently still riding the fading, gentle momentum of this exact same expansion, drifting further into the vast, silent dark. The initial spark of space had successfully ignited, ensuring that reality would never again return to the crushing, lonely confines of the solitary seed. A magnificent, sprawling journey had officially, irrevocably begun. That magnificent, sprawling journey had officially, irrevocably begun, completely replacing the initial spark of space with a brilliant, overwhelming radiance. During the first few seconds of existence, the expanding universe was entirely filled with a glowing, thick plasma of fundamental particles. This was not empty space as we currently understand it, but a dense, dynamic fluid vibrating with almost incomprehensible energy. Every microscopic fraction of a millimeter was completely saturated with this intense, luminous material, leaving absolutely no dark corners or quiet voids. The sheer density of this primordial state meant that particles were constantly, violently colliding in a chaotic, never-ending microscopic storm. It was a terrifyingly energetic environment where matter and radiation were locked together in a fierce, glowing embrace. This brilliantly illuminated era was a necessary fundamental bridge between the pure energy of the absolute beginning and the structured matter of the future. The universe was acting as an unimaginably vast, glowing crucible, actively preparing the essential ingredients required for the long eons of creation. The dark, starry skies we comfortably observe today were still billions of years away from becoming a physical reality. Deep within this intense, radiant crucible, the most fundamental constituents of matter, known as quarks and gluons, roamed completely freely in a thick cosmic soup. Currently, these tiny particles are strictly bound together by the strong nuclear force, securely locked deep inside the protons and neutrons that make up atoms. However, in this extreme primordial environment, the intense heat completely overpowered any attempt at permanent binding, allowing them to drift independently. This unique state of matter, beautifully termed a quark-gluon plasma, behaved much like a nearly perfect, frictionless liquid flowing through the expanding expanse. The gluons, acting as the carriers of the strong force, zipped furiously between the quarks, desperately trying to pull them together amidst the violent thermal chaos. The sensation was one of microscopic anarchy, where the basic building blocks of reality violently refused to be organized or contained. You might notice how your own breathing naturally deepens as you contemplate this microscopic storm of unbounded energy. The particles that currently form the steady, quiet structure of your bones were once part of this wild, untamed, and perfectly fluid ocean. It is a profound testament to the sheer transformative power of the cosmos over deep, unimaginable spans of time. Imagine a radiant ocean of pure, unbounded energy, violently vibrating with intense, blistering heat and absolutely dazzling, blinding light. This was not a localized phenomenon, but a universal condition, stretching endlessly across every single point of the rapidly expanding cosmos. The sheer luminosity of this environment would have been overwhelmingly destructive to any complex structure, operating at an intensity far beyond human comprehension. The light particles, known as photons, were incredibly energetic, carrying so much force that they frequently spontaneously transformed into pairs of physical particles. Conversely, when particles collided in this thick soup, they would instantly annihilate each other, flashing back into pure, brilliant light. This created a constant, chaotic cycle of creation and destruction, a furious, glowing dance occurring everywhere at once. This vibrating ocean of light and matter was the ultimate expression of the universe's raw, unfiltered power, before it had time to cool and calm. It was a beautiful, terrifying realm where the strict line between energy and physical substance was entirely fluid and constantly shifting. The cosmos was a brilliant, uniform wall of opaque radiance, hiding its profound, microscopic secrets behind an impenetrable curtain of glowing fire. Slowly, as the vast cosmos relentlessly continued its graceful, stretching expansion, this immense, terrifying heat finally began to steadily dissipate. The mechanism was remarkably simple but profound. As the physical volume of the universe increased, the incredibly dense energy was forced to spread out over a much larger area. This natural stretching acted as a beautiful universal cooling system, gently lowering the overall temperature of the glowing plasma. Picture the steam rising softly from a freshly poured cup of hot tea, dissipating and cooling as it freely mixes with the wider, open air of a quiet room. In a remarkably similar fashion, the searing heat of the early universe naturally dispersed into the newly created expanding expanse of physical space. The violent microscopic collisions slowly began to lose a fraction of their aggressive destructive momentum as the environment gradually calmed. This crucial cooling phase was an absolutely essential turning point, marking the slow transition from pure chaotic energy toward the possibility of lasting physical structure. Without this steady drop in temperature, the universe would have forever remained a wild, unstructured soup of free-roaming independent particles. The great expansive stretching was gently setting the stage for the very first delicate acts of microscopic assembly. As the cooling naturally allowed the violent chaotic storm to steadily subside, the free-roaming quarks finally lost the necessary energy to resist their mutual attraction. The strong nuclear force carried tirelessly by the invisible gluons was finally able to successfully bind these fundamental particles closely together. They gently snapped into tight, incredibly stable configurations, forming the very first protons and neutrons to ever exist in cosmic history. This delicate microscopic assembly essentially locked the wild quarks into tiny, inescapable prisons from which they have generally never emerged. It was the universe's very first successful attempt at building complex structures, officially moving away from a completely uniform fluid into distinct, measurable physical entities. These newly formed protons and neutrons represent the absolute foundation of all atomic matter, the heavy, solid hearts of every future element. As you comfortably rest your back against your chair, consider that the very core of every atom in your physical body was forged during this exact, fleeting transition. The universe had successfully manufactured the heavy building blocks required for the long, complex journey ahead. The chaotic, fluid soup had gracefully yielded to the profound, quiet stability of the first permanent microscopic structures. During this period of rapid cooling and particle formation, nature beautifully established a delicate, mysterious balance that fundamentally allowed us to be here today. For every particle of normal matter forged in the primordial heat, an almost identical particle of antimatter was also aggressively created, however through a subtle, profound asymmetry in the underlying laws of physics. A tiny, magnificent fraction more normal matter was produced. This incredibly slight imbalance, perhaps only one extra matter particle for every billion pairs created, is one of the most vital, life-affirming secrets of the cosmos. When matter and antimatter inevitably meet, they completely annihilate each other in a brilliant final flash of pure energetic light. If the initial balance had been perfectly equal, all physical matter would have been entirely destroyed, leaving behind a universe filled only with drifting, empty radiation. Notice how the steady rhythm of your pulse is a direct, tangible result of this beautiful, ancient imperfection in the cosmic recipe. We are physically composed entirely of the tiny surviving fraction of normal matter that stubbornly managed to outlast the Great Annihilation. This profound asymmetry transformed what could have been an empty, glowing void into a vast, complex arena capable of eventually supporting life. These rare surviving protons and neutrons, completely victorious after the Great Annihilation, now drifted smoothly through the lingering, brilliant fog. They were no longer actively threatened by destruction, acting instead as the fundamental heavy building blocks for everything we now structurally know. The universe was now populated by these incredibly stable entities, moving calmly through the expanding expanse like heavy ships navigating a thick, glowing mist. Despite their crucial importance, these particles were still entirely isolated, unable to form anything more complex due to the still intense ambient heat. They drifted independently, occasionally colliding but mostly simply existing, patiently waiting for the universe to cool significantly further. They were the raw, essential lumber carefully gathered for a grand construction project that would not truly begin for many more eons. Their steady, quiet presence marked a profound shift from a universe of constant, chaotic transformation to one of established, enduring inventory. The foundational materials had been successfully manufactured and securely preserved, safely riding the graceful wave of cosmic expansion. The deep, heavy seeds of every future star and planet were now permanently scattered throughout the vast, glowing ocean. While the heavy protons and neutrons drifted peacefully, the universal light remained completely trapped in an endless, frantic and chaotic dance. The ambient temperature was still far too high for the lightweight, energetic electrons to settle down and bind with the newly formed, heavier particles. These free electrons formed a dense, vibrating thicket that actively scattered any light attempting to travel in a straight, uninterrupted path. If we were to look closer, we would see photons bouncing continuously off this chaotic swarm of free electrons, ricocheting wildly in every conceivable direction. The light was essentially imprisoned by the very matter it shared the expanding space with, unable to shine freely or travel any significant distance. It was a beautiful, highly energetic cage where the brilliance of the universe was entirely turned inward upon itself. This continuous scattering meant that the universe, despite its incredible, blinding energy, was fundamentally opaque and impossible to physically see through. The cosmos was a brilliant, glowing fog, completely hiding any potential structure or form behind a thick, uniform wall of intense radiance. The grand clearing of this magnificent fog was still a distant event, waiting patiently for the long, slow process of cooling to continue. Even though the primordial environment was unimaginably bright and vibrating with immense power, a hypothetical observer would essentially see nothing. There were absolutely no stars to gaze upon, no twisting galaxies to admire, and no dark voids to provide necessary contrast. The vision would simply be filled with a uniform, glowing wall of opaque radiance, completely featureless and intensely blinding in every direction. This absolute uniformity is a difficult concept to truly grasp, as our modern eyes are deeply accustomed to a universe defined by beautiful structural contrast. In this early era, everywhere was exactly the same as everywhere else, a perfectly smooth distribution of brilliant light and scattered microscopic matter. The sensation would be similar to being completely enveloped in a dense glowing cloud, where up, down and forward hold absolutely no visual meaning. Allow your eyes to soften for a moment, appreciating the dark, comfortable contrast of your current physical surroundings. The early universe was a realm entirely devoid of shadows, perfectly illuminated but completely hiding its profound developing secrets. It was a time of immense hidden preparation, occurring entirely behind a thick, impenetrable veil of perfect glowing white. This incandescent, blinding era, though seemingly chaotic and unstructured, meticulously laid the necessary fundamental foundation for all future physical matter to patiently take shape. The wild, free-roaming quarks had been successfully tamed into heavy, stable protons and neutrons, completely securing the heavy building blocks of reality. The profound, beautiful asymmetry had ensured that enough normal matter stubbornly survived to eventually form everything we touch and see. The intense trapped light and the dense thicket of free electrons were simply waiting for their specific, appointed time to finally, peacefully separate. The universe was operating like a master architect, methodically gathering and securing the essential raw materials before beginning the delicate work of actual assembly. The seemingly endless glowing fluid was not a permanent state, but a grand, necessary prelude to the intricate beauty of the cosmos to come. As the heavy, warm fluid continued its slow, graceful cooling, the stage was perfectly quietly set for the next great transformation. The raw ingredients were fully prepared, floating steadily in the expanding dark, waiting for the temperature to finally drop low enough for actual structural creation. The great glowing fog was holding a magnificent promise, ready to eventually reveal the clear, beautiful depths of the infinite. That great glowing fog held a magnificent promise, and as the ambient heat subsided, a profound, quiet transformation began to subtly unfold across the expanding expanse. Minutes after the initial expansion, the violent thermal agitation that had kept protons and neutrons apart finally weakened enough for them to peacefully approach one another. The strong nuclear force, previously overwhelmed by the sheer blistering kinetic energy of the chaotic environment, could now assert its powerful binding grip. Instead of violently ricocheting off one another in a frantic destructive dance, these fundamental particles began to smoothly, seamlessly latch together. This was not a violent collision, but rather a tranquil fusion, a microscopic snapping together of fundamental components, finding their ultimate stable configurations. The raw lumber of the cosmos was finally being carefully assembled into the very first, incredibly durable structural units. This pivotal, quiet era of delicate assembly fundamentally shifted the universe from a mere collection of isolated particles into a realm capable of complex chemistry. The blinding heat was no longer an insurmountable barrier, but a fading energy that allowed the next crucial stage of physical creation to elegantly proceed. The microscopic building blocks were locking securely into place, forging the unbreakable foundations of everything that was meant to be. This tranquil fusion birthed the very first atomic nuclei, primarily forging vast, overwhelming quantities of simple hydrogen and highly stable helium. A single proton, standing proudly alone, essentially constitutes the nucleus of hydrogen, the simplest and most abundant element that would ever grace the dark skies. When two protons and two neutrons manage to successfully bind together, they form the robust, tightly packed nucleus of helium, a masterpiece of primordial stability. These specific combinations were not random, but perfectly dictated by the precise laws of quantum mechanics operating smoothly within the rapidly cooling, glowing ocean. The universe was efficiently churning out these two incredibly fundamental elements, completely filling the expanding void with the purest, lightest gases imaginable. The ratio of their creation was beautifully fixed, leaving the cosmos dominated by hydrogen, with a smaller, vital portion permanently locked away as helium. Feel the steady, rhythmic rise and fall of your chest as you comfortably breathe in the surrounding air. The vast majority of the matter that currently makes up the physical universe consists entirely of these identical, ancient hydrogen and helium nuclei formed in those very first minutes. They are the ultimate, enduring survivors of this quiet, magnificent era of primordial manufacturing. Alongside the massive, sweeping production of hydrogen and helium, a tiny, almost imperceptible sprinkling of lithium also magically emerged from the cooling fires. This slightly heavier element, requiring the intricate, delicate fusion of 3 protons and 4 neutrons, was incredibly rare, forming only when the exact, perfect conditions were briefly met. Its creation was a fleeting, magnificent anomaly, occurring just before the expanding universe became too cold and sparse to sustain any further nuclear fusion. This delicate dusting of lithium beautifully completed the original, pure cosmic recipe, essentially closing the brief, glorious window of the universe's first chemical forge. The elemental inventory was now entirely fixed, consisting exclusively of these 3 pristine, lightweight ingredients scattered evenly across the glowing expanse. No carbon for future biology, no iron for future planets, and no oxygen for future atmospheres had yet been created or even conceived. The universe was now a rapidly expanding, brilliantly glowing cloud composed almost entirely of these 3 pristine, newly manufactured elements. The raw, chaotic plasma had been successfully, cleanly transformed into a structured, gaseous state, though it remained intensely hot and violently agitated. This immense, rushing cloud possessed no distinct edges or boundaries, filling the entirety of expanding space with a perfectly uniform, churning mixture. If we were to look closer, we would see no localized clumps or defined structures, merely a vast, endless sea of simple atomic nuclei riding the graceful wave of cosmic expansion. The sheer volume of this pristine gas is absolutely staggering, representing the total sum of all matter that would ever eventually be used to construct the brilliant galaxies. It was a perfectly distributed, flawless reservoir of potential, waiting silently in the bright, featureless fog. This pure, unadulterated state represents the absolute baseline of cosmic chemistry, completely untainted by the heavy, complex elements that would later be forged in the hearts of dying giants. It was a fleeting, beautiful era of profound elemental purity, standing as a stark, silent contrast to the incredibly diverse chemical complexity we effortlessly observe today. The foundational ingredients were perfectly mixed, glowing brightly, and ready for the long eons to come. Despite this successful, delicate fusion of heavy nuclei, the cosmos frustratingly remained a brilliantly glowing, opaque fog completely impenetrable to any theoretical vision. The universe was still heavily populated by countless, free-roaming electrons that completely refused to be bound or captured by the newly formed heavier structures. These incredibly lightweight, highly energetic particles zipped furiously through the expanding gas, creating a dense, vibrating thicket that aggressively intercepted every single photon of light. Because these electrons remained unattached, the newly forged hydrogen, helium, and lithium nuclei were not yet true, complete atoms. They were simply positively charged ions, suspended in a swirling, glowing mixture that actively scattered any light attempting to travel in a straight, uninterrupted path. The grand clearing of the cosmos was still completely stalled by this microscopic, frantic energy, keeping the universe locked in a state of blinding whiteout conditions. Notice how the comfortable weight of your resting body grounds you firmly in this present clear moment. The early universe lacked this comfortable clarity, remaining an intensely chaotic, unstructured environment where vision itself was completely, fundamentally impossible. The beautiful dark depths of space we know today were entirely hidden behind this thick, glowing curtain of unbound, vibrating energy. Notice how these incredibly simple elements would naturally wait patiently for hundreds of millions of years to fully realize their profound, incredible destiny. They were not rushed or hurried, simply existing quietly within the expanding glowing fog as the immense universe continued its slow, deliberate cooling. Their very simplicity was their greatest strength, providing the essential, unbreakable stability required for the long, sweeping epics of cosmic construction that lay far ahead. These tiny, perfect nuclei were the absolute ultimate survivors, having cleanly escaped the chaotic destruction of the earliest moments to become the permanent scaffolding of reality. They possessed no internal drive or complex ambition, yet they held the entire magnificent blueprint for every future shining star and beautiful swirling nebula. Their quiet, enduring patience is a beautiful testament to the incredibly slow, majestic pace of the unfolding universe. In this bright, seemingly featureless era, time stretched out endlessly, allowing these foundational building blocks to smoothly disperse across the growing void. They were the silent, heavy seeds of creation, securely planted in the glowing dark, perfectly prepared to eventually blossom into the staggering complexity of the modern cosmos. Their long, quiet wait was an absolutely essential pause, a necessary, calm breath before the fierce ignition of the very first light. The ambient temperature was simply still far too high for the frantic electrons to finally settle down and quietly orbit these newly formed nuclei. Every time a wandering electron attempted to gracefully bind with a positive nucleus, a highly energetic photon would violently crash into it, instantly knocking it back into the chaotic void. The blinding heat of the universe actively prevented the final, crucial step of atomic assembly, keeping matter and light locked in their frustrating, endless struggle. This meant the universe was essentially stuck in a prolonged state of arrested development, waiting completely upon the slow, gentle mercy of continuous cosmic expansion. Until the physical space stretched enough to naturally calm the aggressive ambient radiation, true, electrically neutral atoms could simply not be permanently forged. The microscopic building blocks were all perfectly present, but the intense glowing environment violently refused to allow them to finally, peacefully assemble. The sheer frustration of this era highlights the delicate, perfect balance required for complex physical structure to eventually emerge from pure energy. The universe had to meticulously, carefully fine-tune its internal temperature, dropping it to exactly the precise degree where the binding energy could finally overpower the destructive heat. The long glowing fog stubbornly persisted, fiercely guarding the profound secrets of the clear, dark cosmos that was desperately trying to be born. While the microscopic particles furiously danced and scattered, gravity, though incredibly weak, began its slow, steady and patient work in the absolute background. It started delicately feeling out the incredibly slight, almost imperceptible unevenness in the massive expanding gas cloud of hydrogen and helium. These microscopic variations in density were the preserved, frozen echoes of the very earliest quantum fluctuations, now magnified by the rapid stretching of space. Gravity gently tugged at the slightly denser regions, encouraging the drifting gas to very slowly gather and pool into vast invisible cosmic reservoirs. This was not a violent or sudden collapse, but an incredibly slow, majestic gathering, operating on scales of time and distance that completely defy human comprehension. The universe was quietly, steadily beginning to organize itself, pulling the scattered raw materials into the very first, faint outlines of structure. Take a gentle, deep breath, feeling the secure, invisible pull of the earth comfortably holding you exactly where you are. This exact same fundamental force was quietly orchestrating the grandest architectural project in existence, working blindly within the thick glowing fog. The smooth, featureless expansion was slowly being coaxed into a complex, beautifully intricate web of dark, gathering potential. This gentle, almost imperceptible clumping would later perfectly dictate exactly where the grandest, most magnificent galaxies would eventually spin into brilliant existence. The slightly denser regions of gathered gas possessed a stronger gravitational pull, allowing them to slowly attract even more material from the surrounding emptying voids. These vast, invisible dark pools were the crucial foundational scaffolding, the essential templates upon which the majestic cities of stars would eventually be carefully constructed. Imagine a grand, invisible blueprint being slowly drawn across the expanding cosmos, entirely hidden from view, but carrying the absolute weight of destiny. The very layout of the modern universe, with its sweeping, beautiful filaments and deep, quiet voids, was being permanently established in this blinding, ancient fog. The locations of future superclusters and the lonely expanses of empty space were all being decided by the slow, patient pull of gravity on these tiny, ancient imperfections. The universe was essentially dreaming its own future, mapping out the precise locations of spectacular cosmic landmarks long before the very first star had even ignited. This profound, quiet organization ensures that the incredible, sprawling beauty of the cosmos is not random, but deeply rooted in the earliest, most delicate moments of its creation. The grand architecture was secretly, quietly taking shape within the bright, blinding mist. For now, however, the immense universe merely expanded and cooled, quietly operating as a vast, glowing ocean of completely scattered, simple ingredients. The profound architectural work of gravity remained entirely invisible, completely hidden behind the relentless, opaque wall of trapped, scattering light. It was an era defined by a deep, beautiful waiting, a slow, majestic transition from the pure, chaotic energy of the beginning to the structured, clear beauty of the future. The heavy, stable nuclei drifted smoothly through the bright, featureless expanse, completely unaware of the magnificent, sprawling structures they would one day flawlessly build. The cosmic clock ticked silently forward, measuring out the incredibly long eons required for the temperature to finally drop and the great fog to lift. The early universe was a realm of perfect, glowing potential, actively holding its breath before the grand, clearing revelation. The essential foundations had all been successfully, permanently laid, and the pure, unadulterated raw materials were perfectly distributed across the endlessly growing dark. The violent, chaotic birth was finally over, softly replaced by the patient, steady work of cooling, gathering, and preparing for the light to finally break free. A profound, beautiful stillness had gently settled over the cosmos, setting the quiet stage for the grandest unveiling in all of history. Notice how the heat was no longer a crushing, destructive force, but had become a mellowed, glowing ember of its former self. This transition allowed the physical environment to settle into a state of comparative calm, providing the first real opportunity for matter to behave with a sense of order. The frantic, high-energy collisions that had defined the universe's infancy were beginning to lose their aggressive edge and settle into a more predictable rhythm. This cooling was not just a drop in temperature, but a fundamental shift in the cosmic balance of power between energy and structure. As the thermal intensity waned, the microscopic particles found themselves in a realm that was finally becoming hospitable to their lasting existence. It was the formal end of the universe's violent childhood, a cooling breath that signalled the start of a much more patient and structural era. As the temperature continued to fall, the energetic electrons that had spent millennia in a frantic and unyielding race finally began to lose their manic momentum. These incredibly lightweight, nimble particles slowed down significantly, losing the thermal strength required to resist the electrical pull of the waiting hydrogen and helium atomic nuclei. This process, beautifully known as recombination, was less like a violent collision and more like a gentle, destined homecoming for the building blocks of reality. The electrostatic attraction between the positive nuclei and the negative electrons finally won the long-standing tug-of-war against the diminishing ambient heat. Electrons were gracefully captured, settling into stable, quiet orbits around the nuclei for the very first time in cosmic history. This was the moment the wild, free-roaming energy of the plasma was finally successfully domesticated and organized into a more permanent and peaceful form. No longer were the particles forced to bounce wildly off one another in a chaotic and endless microscopic storm. Instead, they were finding their assigned places in a new, more peaceful hierarchy of matter that would last for billions of years. If we were to look closer at this microscopic assembly, we would see the birth of stability itself, a quiet settling of the elemental dust across the horizon. This elegant and precise pairing successfully formed the very first, complete, electrically neutral atoms to ever exist in the long history of the cosmos. For the first time, matter was no longer a collection of agitated and charged ions, but a vast collection of stable, quiet hydrogen and helium gas. This transition effectively neutralized the chaotic electromagnetic interference that had defined the universe's infancy for thousands of years. With the electrons now securely tucked away in stable orbits, the physical nature of the universe's medium changed fundamentally and irrevocably. Surprisingly, this neutrality meant that the electromagnetic force, which had previously dominated every interaction, was suddenly masked within the structure of the atom. The universe transitioned from a highly reactive electrical environment into a calm and neutral reservoir of simple gas that was finally ready to move. As you rest your body in this moment, consider that this fundamental neutrality is what allows matter to exist in the solid, stable forms we touch every day. Without this ancient, graceful pairing, the universe would have remained a volatile and unmanageable storm of charged energy. The formation of neutral atoms was the silent birth of the material world, providing a profound foundation for everything that would eventually follow. Imagine the thick, glowing fog that had saturated every corner of existence for eons suddenly and beautifully evaporating into a thin, invisible air. Where once there was only an opaque and blinding wall of white light, there was now a beautifully transparent and endless void stretching in all directions. This was the legendary moment the cosmic curtain was pulled back, revealing a horizon of staggering depth and crystal clarity for the very first time. It was as if a heavy, luminous mist had finally been lifted by a gentle, invisible breeze, uncovering the true vastness of the cosmic stage. The sensation of this clearing was a profound shift from a universe that felt small and enclosed to one that felt infinitely deep and open. For the very first time, there was a true distance to behold, a path that light could follow without being immediately intercepted by the thick plasma. The universe had effectively opened its eyes, shedding the cataracts of its early plasma state to gaze upon its own immense and magnificent growth. This transparency was the gift of the neutral atoms, which no longer hindered the free movement of the primordial light. The era of the glowing fog was officially and beautifully over, replaced by an endless horizon of transparent dark potential. Light, which had been trapped in a claustrophobic and endless cycle of scattering for hundreds of thousands of years, was finally and permanently released to travel continuously. These photons, now completely decoupled from the interference of free electrons, began a straight-line journey through the newly cleared space that continues to this very day. This burst of light essentially took a high-resolution snapshot of the universe, exactly as it appeared at that specific moment of release. It was the first time in history that light could truly fulfill its fundamental purpose of illuminating the vastness and travelling across the void. This event, known as decoupling, allowed the light to break free from its prison of matter and fly out into the expanding dark. The photons were finally able to streak across the cosmos without being ricocheted or absorbed every few centimeters by a chaotic thicket of electrons. This created a permanent glowing record of the early universe, a radiant echo that would travel across billions of years to reach our modern eyes. If we were to look closer, we would realize that this light is the ultimate traveler, a tireless witness to the transition from the beginning to the present. The universe had finally spoken its first clear word, and that word was written in the language of traveling light. This ancient and venerable light, known widely as the cosmic microwave background, still washes over us gently today from every conceivable direction in the night sky. Though it has been significantly stretched by billions of years of cosmic expansion into invisible microwave frequencies, its presence remains a faint and persistent hum. It is the oldest and most profound thing we can ever hope to see, a direct and unaltered message from the dawn of transparency. As you sit quietly, realize that this ancient primordial radiation is physically touching your skin at this very second. We're constantly immersed in this relic of the Great Clearing, a background glow that fills the entire volume of space like a warm, lingering memory. It provides a perfect and unchanging reference frame, a way for us to measure our movement through the immense and expanding void. This light is the foundation of our modern understanding of the Big Bang, offering undeniable proof of the universe's hot and dense origins. It is a universal inheritance, a shared history that belongs to every star, planet, and observer in existence across the galaxies. This gentle microwave bath is the ultimate comfort, a reminder that we are never truly alone in the dark. If we were to look even closer at the extremely subtle patterns within this lingering glow, we would see the faint and frozen echoes of the universe's original vibrations. These tiny temperature variations act as a perfect fossil record of the sound waves that once rippled through the primordial plasma before the clearing. They represent the microscopic seeds of all future structures, captured in the light at the exact moment the cosmic fog finally lifted. These patterns are the ancestral memories of the universe, stored forever in the first clear light ever emitted across the growing void. These fluctuations show us where the gas was slightly denser and where it was slightly thinner, providing the blueprint for the entire web of galaxies. They are the fingerprints of the earliest moments, magnified by the expansion of space until they became the size of entire galactic clusters. Without these tiny, ancient imperfections, the universe would have remained a perfectly smooth and featureless cloud of gas, forever incapable of forming stars. Notice how the stillness of your current environment allows you to contemplate these massive cosmic scales with a sense of peace. The patterns in the ancient light are the silent, glowing architects of everything we have ever known or loved. Following the final release of this brilliant primordial flash, the sky transitioned from a blinding and uniform radiance to a deep and profound darkness for the very first time. Since there were no stars yet born to provide new light, the universe became a silent, dark ocean composed of cold gas and invisible radiation. This was the true birth of night, a vast and quiet emptiness that completely replaced the sweltering and eternal day of the early years. The universe had finally found its rest in the cool, dark cradle of the first true space, marking the beginning of the Dark Ages. The brilliant glow of the Big Bang had faded into the infrared, leaving behind a cosmos that was as black as ink and as cold as the void. It was a period of deep, cosmic sleep, where the only movement was the slow and invisible gathering of gas. This profound darkness was not an empty void, but a place of immense preparation, where the foundations of the future were being laid in secrecy. It was a time of incubation, a necessary pause after the high drama of the first few 100,000 years of fire. The universe was now a clear, dark and empty theatre, waiting patiently for its first great performers to take the stage. The universe was maturing, moving from a volatile and unpredictable explosion of energy into a stable and predictable storehouse of material. Matter was now free to follow its own path, unaffected by the constant aggressive pressure of the radiation that had once kept it scattered. This transition is known as the era of matter dominance, a time when gravity finally became the supreme ruler of the expanding cosmos. The atoms began to exert their own influence, drawing together in the darkness to begin the slow, methodical work of building the first stars. This change in dominance is why we have a universe filled with objects rather than just drifting, featureless light. The radiant era was a beautiful and necessary beginning, but the era of matter is where the true story of the cosmos really begins. A serene and absolute stillness fell across the expanding cosmos, setting a calm and perfect stage for the slow, invisible magic of gravity to finally begin. Without the constant agitation of radiation pushing against the gas, the atoms were finally free to gather and clump together without any significant interference. This period of quiet preparation was the ultimate breath of peace before the next grand and fiery era of light began. Gravity began to pull at the tiny density variations recorded in the ancient light, slowly and steadily creating the first filaments of the cosmic web. This was a process of infinite patience, taking millions of years to even begin showing its first results in the total darkness. The universe was no longer a place of sudden, violent changes, but a place of slow, inevitable, and majestic growth. Surprisingly, this stillness is what allowed the universe to eventually host life, as it provided the stable environment necessary for complex systems to grow. The calm was not an ending, but a profound and necessary opening, a clearing of the way for everything that was yet to come. The Great Clearing had finished its work, leaving behind a universe that was finally, beautifully ready for its first light. The magnificent readiness for that first light did not lead to an immediate dawn, but rather ushered in a prolonged and remarkably peaceful era, beautifully known as the Dark Ages. Following the Great Clearing, the universe entered a state of profound, starless serenity that stretched across hundreds of millions of years of expanding solitude. This was a time of true cosmic maturation, where the high-energy chaos of the birth was replaced by a deep, expansive patience that defined the very nature of existence. Deep within this vast period of quiet, the universe was far from stagnant or empty. It was a realm of active, invisible preparation. The searing temperatures of the early furnace had given way to a cool, manageable darkness that allowed the fundamental laws of gravity to finally take the lead. It was a restful intermission in the story of creation, a long pause that allowed the scattered elements to find their place in the growing void. This period represents the longest stretch of tranquility the cosmos has ever known, a time before the violent lives of stars and the collisions of galaxies. It was a beautiful, dark blankness that held the entire future within its quiet depths, waiting for the precisely right moment to move forward. The universe was not missing its light. It was simply resting in the dark, gathering the strength required for the complexity that was yet to come. In this vast and silent theatre of the deep, no stars or galaxies had yet been born to illuminate the endless, expanding expanse of transparent hydrogen gas. The universe was a clear, dark void, holding the raw materials of all future creation in a state of perfectly chilled, primordial suspension. If we were to look closer at this darkness, we would find nothing but a cool, invisible wind of simple atoms drifting through the infinite without any source of heat. The transparency gained during the Great Clearing remained absolute, but since there were no new sources of light, the clarity revealed only a profound and empty blackness. There were no swirling nebulae of colour, no glowing disks of star-forming gas, and no flashes of supernova to break the solitude. It was a universe made of pure, unadulterated potential, where the primary ingredients of hydrogen and helium were the only inhabitants of the dark. This structure of pure gas was the essential precursor to everything we see today, acting as the raw clay from which the first celestial bodies would be sculpted. Without this starless period, the gas would never have had the time to settle into the cold, dense pockets necessary for the birth of a star. The darkness was not an absence of activity, but a necessary condition for the first flickers of organized matter to slowly take shape. The only light remaining from the initial primordial furnace was the fading afterglow of the Big Bang itself, which was slowly stretching into the invisible infrared and microwave frequencies. This ancient radiance, which had once been a blinding white fire, had cooled so significantly that it no longer provided any visible glow to the dark expanse. It was a ghost of a light, a lingering memory of the beginning that filled every corner of the void without ever breaking the deep solitude. Surprisingly, the universe was technically filled with this radiation, yet to any eye, it would have appeared as a state of total and absolute pitch black. The photons had lost so much energy during their long journey through expanding space that they could no longer trigger the sensation of vision. They moved silently through the transparent gas, carrying the signature of the early universe like a secret message that no one was yet around to read. This fading glow provided a constant, albeit cooling, background temperature that governed the behavior of the drifting hydrogen atoms. It ensured that the universe did not freeze instantly, but rather cooled at a majestic and measured pace that allowed gravity to do its work. Even in its most profound darkness, the cosmos was still whispering the story of its hot and brilliant origin to the empty rooms of space. Picture an immense and tranquil ocean of dark gas, quietly growing colder and larger with every passing millennium as the fabric of space continued its graceful stretching. As the volume of the universe expanded, the energy density dropped even further, causing the temperature of the gas to plunge toward the absolute stillness of the deep freeze. This cooling was not a sign of decay, but a necessary calming that allowed the drifting atoms to lose their frantic energy and settle. The gas was not a chaotic storm, but a smooth and uniform sea, rippling only with the slightest variations inherited from the very beginning of time. These ripples moved with a heavy liquid grace, travelling through the darkness as the universe grew increasingly vast and lonely. There was a sense of profound scale in this expansion, a widening of the horizons that made the early, crowded moments feel like a distant and faded dream. If we were to look closer, we would see that this ocean of gas was the most massive and significant structure in existence, outweighing any future star by an unimaginable margin. It was the reservoir of reality, the great storehouse of matter that was being prepared for the fires of the first stars. This cool, dark sea was the cradle of the cosmos, providing a stable and quiet environment for the long process of gravitational assembly. Hidden within this absolute and total darkness, gravity was orchestrating a magnificent slow-motion cosmic ballet that would eventually define the shape of all future things. While the universe appeared empty and still, every single atom was responding to the tiny invisible tugs of its neighbours, slowly beginning to drift toward regions of density. This was a dance of infinite patience, a subtle gathering of matter that occurred without the slightest sound or flicker of light. The gravitational pull was initially incredibly weak, as the gas was spread so thin across the massive and expanding volume of the dark void. However, because the universe was so quiet and free from the aggressive pressure of radiation, even the smallest tug began to have a cumulative effect over the eons. The atoms were being lured into a grand arrangement, a hidden geometry of matter that was being built entirely in the shadows. Invisible tendrils of dark matter acted as a steady and permanent scaffolding, gently drawing the floating hydrogen gas together into vast structural reservoirs. This mysterious substance, which does not interact with light or heat, provided the massive gravitational anchor necessary for the lightweight gas to overcome its own internal pressure. Surprisingly, the dark matter was the true architect of the cosmos, laying the foundations of the great cosmic web while the rest of the universe slept. Because dark matter was already clumped into massive invisible halos, it acted as a series of gravitational wells into which the ordinary hydrogen gas could naturally fall. The gas was drawn into these dark pits, pooling and thickening in the centre of the dark matter's embrace like water collecting in a bowl. Without this invisible support, The hydrogen would have remained too scattered and too warm to ever collapse into the dense forms required for stars. This structure of the unseen was the most important feature of the Dark Ages, providing the rigid framework upon which all visible light would eventually be hung. We owe our existence to these silent, dark anchors that held the universe together when it was nothing more than a drifting mist. The dark matter scaffolding ensured that the universe's first light would not be a random flicker, but a perfectly placed and organized dawn. These vast clouds of primordial matter thickened in absolute and profound silence, completely unseen by any potential observer in the pitch-black void. As the gas pooled in the dark matter wells, it began to form the first massive proto-galactic structures, slowly turning the featureless gas into a complex network of clouds. There was a strange beauty in this hidden growth, a slow-motion accumulation of mass that happened far away from any influence of heat. The centres of these clouds became increasingly dense as the weight of the outer layers began to push inward with a relentless and growing force. This thickening was a process of concentration, a focusing of the universe's raw materials into the specific points where the first stars would eventually ignite. The silence of the era was absolute, as the gas was still too thin to carry sound, creating a realm of total hushed preparation. Notice how the stillness of your current environment allows you to contemplate these massive cosmic scales with a sense of genuine peace. The clouds in the Dark Ages were the largest objects to ever exist, stretching across hundreds of thousands of light-years of empty space. They were the silent giants of the early universe, growing in the dark until they were ready to finally burst into a brilliant and world-changing light. The universe essentially took a deep, restful breath lasting hundreds of millions of years, preparing its internal structures for the next great act of the drama. This was the long, quiet intermission of history, a time when the sheer scale of time allowed for the slow magic of gravity to work. Notice how your own resting body reflects this same sense of quiet preparation, gathering energy in the stillness of the moment for the actions that are yet to come. This restful period was essential because the transition from a smooth gas to a structured star requires an immense amount of gravitational work and time. The universe could not be rushed. It needed the long silence of the Dark Ages to allow the heat of the beginning to fully fade away. It was a time of cosmic incubation, a dark womb where the first seeds of the modern world were being carefully and slowly nurtured. The breath of the universe was a widening and a cooling, a movement away from the singular point of the beginning toward the infinite variety of the future. During these millions of years, the cosmos was perfecting its balance, ensuring that the first stars would be born into an environment that was ready to support them. It was the most peaceful era in history, a long and silent pause that preceded the most violent and brilliant awakening. Deep within the densest and most concentrated pockets of gathered gas, the internal pressure began to slowly and inevitably rise as gravity squeezed the atoms together. This compression generated a brand new kind of heat, not from the Big Bang itself, but from the friction and energy of the gas falling into itself. The cores of these dark clouds were beginning to warm, reaching toward a critical threshold that would eventually reignite the fires of reality. The temperature at the center of these clouds began to climb from a few degrees above absolute zero to hundreds, then thousands of degrees. This internal warming was the first sign that the long night was approaching its end, as the kinetic energy of the falling atoms was converted into heat. Surprisingly, the very darkness that had defined the era was now creating the conditions necessary for the return of a brilliant and piercing light. This structure of rising pressure was the final stage of the gravitational assembly, a tightening of the cosmic knot that would soon lead to a spectacular release. The gas was being crushed with such force that the individual atoms were beginning to protest, vibrating with an intensity that signaled an imminent and massive change. The universe was no longer just a cold and drifting ocean. It was a series of mounting pressures waiting for a spark. The stage was perfectly and finally set in the absolute pitch black, for a brilliant reawakening that would change the face of the cosmos forever. The Dark Ages were drawing to a close as the first pockets of gas reached the tipping point of gravitational collapse where nuclear fusion could begin. The universe was no longer just a collection of drifting gas, but a nursery of unborn light, holding its breath before the first blue star shattered the night. This reawakening would not happen everywhere at once, but would start as a single tiny flicker in the heart of a massive and ancient cloud of hydrogen. From that one point, a wave of light would eventually wash across the entire expanse, ending the era of darkness and beginning the era of the stars. The long period of preparation was over, and the raw materials had been perfectly organised into the engines of a new and radiant era. The transition was a moment of supreme triumph for the forces of gravity and structure over the chaos of the beginning. It proved that the universe was capable of creating something entirely new out of the cold and dark remnants of its own fiery birth. The stage was silent, the actors were in place, and the cosmos was finally beautifully ready for the curtain to rise on the magnificent story of the first light. The magnificent story of the first light officially began deep within the thickest and most concentrated reservoirs of primordial gas, where gravity had spent millions of years gathering the raw elements of creation. In these cavernous and formerly lightless regions, the weight of entire galactic foundations was bearing down on the centres with a relentless, crushing force. This was the ultimate tightening of the cosmic knot, a process that transformed the cold, drifting hydrogen into a dense and sweltering pressure cooker of immense potential. Gravitational pressure finally reached a monumental and irreversible tipping point, forcing the internal temperature to climb into the millions of degrees. The atoms at the core of these clouds were no longer merely drifting, they were being crushed together with such ferocity that the very boundaries of their existence were starting to fail. It was the final moment of the Great Silence, a period of mounting tension that held the entire future of the universe in a state of breathless anticipation. This structure of extreme compression was the essential bridge between the dark age of gas and the radiant era of the stars. The energy generated by this collapse was the first significant source of heat since the Big Bang itself, signalling that the long cooling of the cosmos was about to be interrupted. Deep in the dark, the first heartbeats of a new reality were beginning to pulse with a low, heavy warmth. Surprisingly, the universe suddenly witnessed its very first spark of nuclear fusion, as the hydrogen atoms were finally crushed into one another with absolute, undeniable power. This cosmic ignition produced a furious and brilliant light that completely shattered the long, peaceful darkness of the cosmic ages. The total blackness was instantly pierced by a single, blinding blue point of radiance, signalling that the starless solitude was officially and permanently at an end. This first light was a monumental triumph of order over the drifting chaos, a self-sustaining fire that defied the cold of the surrounding void. It was not a gentle glow, but a violent and beautiful release of energy that had been stored within the atoms since the beginning of time. The sky was no longer a featureless and empty room, but a theatre of light where the first star stood as a solitary and magnificent performer. The sensation of this ignition was like the sudden warm flicker of a match inside a cavernous darkened hall, illuminating the ancient architecture for the first time. From this one point, the light began its long journey across the transparent expanse, carrying the news of a new era to every corner of the dark. The universe had successfully reignited its own fires, proving that the cold remnants of the past could become the brilliant engines of the future. These primordial giants were incredibly massive, far exceeding the scale and intense ferocity of any star that currently populates our modern night sky. Burning with a pure, fierce blue intensity, they radiated with a power millions of times greater than our own familiar sun. Their sheer size was a direct result of the pure, metal-free gas from which they were born, allowing them to grow to gargantuan proportions before their internal engines ignited. Because they were composed entirely of the original hydrogen and helium, They lack the elements that would eventually help stars regulate their growth and temperature. They were the wild and untamed ancestors of the modern cosmos, living fast and burning with an incandescent indigo heat that defined the early dawn. If we were to look closer, we would see stars that were hundreds of times the mass of the Sun, acting as massive blue anchors in the expanding dark. This generation of stars was a unique phenomenon, a one-time event made possible only by the pristine conditions of the post-Big Bang environment. They were the pioneers of the light, setting the standard for everything that would follow, while remaining fundamentally different from the stars we see today. Their blue radiance was the first true colour to paint the universe since the Great Clearing, a vibrant and energetic signal of a world reborn. Imagine a single, magnificent lantern flickering to life in the centre of an endless cathedral, soon joined by millions of others across the formerly infinite and silent void. What started as a solitary spark quickly became a localized chorus of brilliant lights, scattered along the invisible threads of the dark matter scaffolding. The universe was no longer a place of absolute shadow, but was becoming a speckled canvas of emerging brilliance and warmth. Notice how the steady, effortless rhythm of your own breathing mirrors the quiet, rhythmic ignition of these first celestial engines. As you find your centre in this moment, the cosmos was finding its own centres of gravity, lighting the way for all future observers. The darkness was being pushed back by a growing community of stars, transforming the lonely expanse into a neighbourhood of light. This collection of early stars did not form a single galaxy, but rather populated the entire web of matter with localized points of intense energy. Each one was a monument to the power of gravity, a testament to what can be achieved when the simplest of gases is gathered with sufficient patience. The cosmic dawn was not a single event, but a slow and beautiful awakening that travelled from cloud to cloud across the deep. Their intense ultraviolet light pushed rapidly outward from their blue surfaces, striking the surrounding cold and neutral cosmic gas with a sudden energetic force. This radiation was so powerful that it began to strip the electrons away from the hydrogen atoms once again, a process known as reionization. The universe was being actively reheated from the inside out, as the fierce energy of the stars reclaimed the transparent void for the light. This ultraviolet bombardment was the first time that energy had actively shaped the environment of the gas since the earliest moments of the Big Bang. The neutral atoms, which had been peacefully drifting in the dark, were now being vibrated and transformed by the arrival of the stellar photons. It was a second great ionization, a renewal of the universe's energetic state that allowed for a much more complex interaction between light and matter. If we were to look closer, we would see the light carving out pathways through the gas, creating a dynamic and changing landscape in place of the static dark. The energy of the first stars was not just illuminating the void, it was physically altering the nature of the space around them. This reionization was the ultimate finishing touch on the cosmic dawn, ensuring that the light would forever be the dominant force in the story of the stars. This gentle but persistent reheating softly blew away the lingering neutral mists, creating vast glowing bubbles of clear, ionized space around each new star. These expanding spheres of influence acted like clear windows into the deep dark, allowing the light to travel even further than before. The cosmos was beginning to look like a field of sparkling gems, each encased in its own protective and radiant halo of transformed gas. As the bubbles grew and merged, the entire universe was slowly transitioned from a state of neutral opacity to a state of transparent, energetic clarity. This was the final clearing of the cosmic sky, a process that removed the last remnants of the Dark Ages and allowed the full spectrum of light to shine. The sensation was one of a grand opening, a removal of the last barriers between the observers and the infinite depths of the void. This structure of glowing bubbles represented the first large-scale organization of light in the history of the cosmos. It was a beautiful, expanding architecture of radiance, where each star contributed its own unique sphere of influence to the growing dawn. The universe was no longer a uniform fog or a uniform dark, but a complex and shimmering collection of clear, light-filled rooms. For the very first time in the history of the cosmos, heavy elements like carbon, oxygen and iron were being actively forged within the high-pressure furnaces of these stellar hearts. The simple recipe of hydrogen and helium was being enriched by a brand new complexity, as the stars functioned as the ultimate chemical laboratories. These elements were the first of their kind, born from the intense struggle of gravity against the outward push of nuclear fire. As you feel the gentle warmth of your own resting body, contemplate that the very elements within you were first dreamt of in these ancient blue furnaces. Every breath you take and every beat of your heart utilizes the carbon and oxygen that began its journey in the center of these primordial giants. We are the direct descendants of this first generation of light, carrying their ancient chemical legacy in our very cells. This structure of nucleosynthesis represents the birth of true variety in the universe, moving away from the stark simplicity of the early gas. The stars were not just shining, they were manufacturing the future piece by piece, atom by atom. The cold and empty void was being populated by the raw materials of life, hidden within the brilliant blue glow of the first masters of the dark. When these short-lived and massive stars eventually exhausted their fuel, they did not simply fade away, but gracefully exploded in the most violent and brilliant displays of power imaginable. These supernovae shattered the silence of the dawn, releasing a final blinding burst of energy that outshone entire clusters of their neighbours. This was the first time that death had occurred in the cosmos, yet it was a death that brought the gift of endless life. These explosions scattered the rich, newly forged ashes of creation across the pristine and waiting universe, seeding the surrounding gas with carbon, silicon and iron. The debris from these deaths was the greatest inheritance the first generation could leave behind, ensuring that the next generation of stars would be born into a richer world. The universe was being fertilized by its own destruction, turning the simple hydrogen clouds into complex chemical gardens. Surprisingly, the most violent moments of the dawn were also the most creative, as the heavy elements were flung out into the transparent voids at incredible speeds. These shockwaves helped to compress new clouds of gas, triggering a second wave of star formation that was even more diverse than the first. The first stars were the short-lived martyrs of the light, dying so that the complexity of the future could finally take root. These invaluable stardust gifts provided the raw and necessary materials for the eventual formation of future rocky planets, cratered moons, and eventually life itself. Without the sacrificial lives and deaths of these first blue giants, the universe would have remained a sterile and simple ocean of gas. Every solid thing we have ever touched or seen is the recycled stardust of a star that lived and died billions of years ago in the deep past. The carbon in your DNA, the calcium in your bones, and the iron in your blood all share a direct lineage with these ancient primordial explosions. We are walking monuments to the first light, carrying the physical remnants of the cosmic dawn within our own bodies as we move through the world. The stardust is not just out there in the dark, it is the very fabric of our being, the ancient and enduring material of our existence. Notice how the weight of your body against the ground connects you to the heavy elements, forged in those first brilliant fires. This connection is absolute and unbreakable, a physical bridge that spans the entire history of the expanding universe. The gifts of the first stars were the seeds of everything we are, providing the essential ingredients for the long and beautiful story of life. The universe was no longer a simple canvas of pure hydrogen, but had successfully evolved into a developing and vibrant tapestry of glowing complexity. Light, matter, and newly forged elements were now weaving together into the intricate and colourful architecture of the modern cosmos. The story of the first light had reached its peak, transforming the cold and dark nursery into a bright and living home for everything that was yet to occur. This transition was the most significant change since the beginning of time, as the universe gained the ability to grow, change, and eventually think. The tapestry was being embroidered with the first galaxies, the first planetary systems, and the first hints of the chemical diversity that would lead to us. It was a world of colour and energy, where the dark was no longer a threat, but a beautiful background for the brilliant play of the light. The cosmic dawn was complete, leaving behind a universe that was finally beautifully ready for its long and magnificent future. The stage was fully lit, the ingredients were perfectly mixed, and the story of creation was moving forward with a new and unstoppable momentum. From the first spark in the dark, a magnificent and living reality had finally, permanently blossomed into the light. The blossoming of that first light was merely the prelude to a much grander organisation of matter, as the unstoppable momentum of gravity began to pull the individual pioneers together. Pulled continuously by the relentless yet surprisingly gentle hand of universal attraction, the first stars began to gather into magnificent cosmic families. These were the earliest gatherings of light in the vast dark, a collective response to the invisible pull that would soon define the architecture of the entire heavens. Instead of wandering as lonely sparks in the infinite void, these stars found solace in the company of their neighbours, drawn together into localised pockets of increasing density. The sensation of this gathering is like the slow, purposeful clustering of fireflies in a silent meadow, where the light of many creates a much softer and more resilient glow. This was the birth of social structure in the cosmos, a transition from the isolation of the dawn to the communal existence of the first star clusters. If we were to look closer, we would see these glowing pioneers moving in majestic, intersecting paths, held together by the same invisible force that keeps your own body grounded and secure in this moment. Gravity was no longer just creating individual engines of fire, it was weaving them into a grander collective tapestry that would eventually become the foundation of every galaxy. The universe was methodically moving from the singular to the plural, building the first great cities of light. These early galaxies were remarkably small, irregular, and highly chaotic in their structure, appearing more like fragmented whispers of light than the grand spirals we admire today. In the youthful turbulence of the cosmos, they behaved like sparkling drops of deep water merging on a windowpane, constantly colliding and flowing into one another to create larger forms. There was a raw and unrefined energy to these first gatherings, as they lacked the elegant, symmetrical designs that would only be sculpted by billions of years of patient rotation. Surprisingly, the universe was a restless and dynamic environment during this era of assembly, with these proto-galactic clouds violently interacting and tearing at each other's glowing edges. They were essentially the rough drafts of creation, experimental collections of gas and stars that were being constantly reshaped by the fierce tidal forces of their neighbours. The sensation was one of constant fluid motion, a majestic and slow-motion reorganisation of the primordial materials into increasingly massive and complex structures. As you find a deeper sense of stillness in your resting body, imagine this primordial restlessness occurring across distances that defy human measure. Every collision was a creative act, a merging of resources that allowed the small to eventually become the immense through the sheer power of persistence. The chaos of these early irregular forms was the necessary workshop where the future symmetry of the heavens was being methodically and tirelessly prepared. At the absolute centre of these swirling and energetic gatherings, massive black holes began to organically form, acting as the silent, dark anchors for their newly born star cities. These gravitational giants were not mere cosmic predators, but essential foundations that helped to regulate the growth and stability of the entire galactic family. They sat quietly in the deep heart of the light, pulling matter toward them with such overwhelming force that they became the unmoving axis upon which the entire star system would eventually spin. The relationship between the galaxy and its central black hole was one of profound and delicate balance. where the giant provided the necessary weight to keep the swirling stars from drifting back into the void. This was a structural necessity, a way for the universe to ensure that its most magnificent creations remained held together by a single, powerful point of focus. Without these dark anchors, the early clusters might have remained scattered and thin, unable to withstand the relentless expansion of the space around them. This structure of the visible orbiting the invisible represents one of the most elegant paradoxes of the cosmos, where the brightest cities are secured by the darkest of hearts. The black holes were the silent guardians of the assembly, providing a steady gravitational heartbeat that echoed through the surrounding clouds of gas and dust. They were the ultimate foundations, the heavy cornerstones upon which the grandest cathedrals of light were being built. Picture vast and glowing rivers of starlight flowing softly into one another, creating ever larger islands of brilliant illumination within the deepening sea of the dark. The merging of these early clusters was a mesmerizing process, resembling the slow and graceful swirl of cream mixing into a dark cup of coffee. The light did not just hit other light, it blended, spiraled, and coalesced in a fluid dance of cosmic integration that stretched across millions of years of patient time. Notice how the light seems to follow the invisible contours of the space itself, moving like water through a landscape of dark matter valleys. These rivers of stars were the veins of the early universe, transporting the heavy elements forged in the first fires into the hearts of new and developing systems. Every merger was a grander synthesis, a pooling of light that slowly pushed back the boundaries of the original darkness until the first true galactic islands were fully formed. This continuous flowing and merging ensured that the universe was never a static or finished product, but a living and evolving work of light. Each new island of illumination was a beacon of complexity, a place where the history of the stars and the future of the elements were being woven together. The sensation was one of endless, radiant growth, a soft and steady illumination that was slowly claiming the vastness of the void for the story of the stars. The universe quickly became a dynamic and living architecture composed of elegant spiraling disks, glowing elliptical spheres, and vast drifting clouds of colourful cosmic dust. This was the era where the physical shapes of reality began to diversify, moving away from the formless gas of the past into a gallery of magnificent and distinct structures. Each galaxy developed its own unique personality, dictated by the specific conditions of its birth and the history of its local gravitational interactions. Some gatherings settled into smooth, rounded shapes of ancient golden light, while others began to spin out delicate, winding arms of blue stars and pink gas. The drifting cosmic dust acted as a shimmering veil between the stars, catching and scattering the light to create the beautiful, soft hues that define the deep sky. This structure of variety was a testament to the sheer creative potential of gravity and time working together on a truly universal scale. Allow your mind to rest on the sheer diversity of these celestial forms, which exist in numbers that far exceed the grains of sand on every beach of our world. We inhabit a universe that is not just functional, but deeply and structurally beautiful, where every angle of light reveals a new and intricate design. The living architecture of the galaxies was the final proof that the simple hydrogen of the beginning could be transformed into a masterpiece of infinite complexity. Over billions of years of patient rotation, these graceful and slow-motion collisions eventually forged the massive, organized spiral galaxies we easily recognize today. The chaotic turbulence of the early years was gradually smoothed out by the relentless persistence of angular momentum, forcing the gas and stars into flat, spinning planes. This transformation was a triumph of order over the random movements of the past, creating the grand, celestial wheels that now serve as the primary homes of stars. If we were to look closer, we would see the spiral arms acting as waves of density, triggering the birth of new stars as they sweep through the reservoirs of gas. These structures are not just static shapes, but dynamic engines of creation that keep the galaxy vibrant and alive for tens of billions of years. The sensation of a mature spiral is one of profound rhythmic stability, a grand and silent spinning that has been perfected by the passage of unimaginable ages. Your own resting body is currently participating in this grand rotation as we travel within one of these majestic spirals across the vastness of the deep. This transition from chaotic merger to organized rotation represents the maturity of the cosmos, a settling into a long-term rhythm that allows for the slow development of planetary systems. The universe had found its stride, turning the initial fire of the Big Bang into the steady glowing clockwork of the galactic disks. Our own familiar Milky Way began to take its distinct and majestic shape during this patient era of ongoing and relentless cosmic construction. It started as a collection of small, ambitious clusters that merged together with a sense of quiet destiny, slowly building the core and the sweeping arms that define our home. Every star in our neighbourhood is a participant in this ancient history, carrying the memory of the collisions and gatherings that forged the ground we stand upon. The formation of our galaxy was not a sudden event, but a slow and deliberate assembly of gas, dark matter, and millions of blue-white stars. It swallowed smaller neighbours and integrated their starlight into its own, growing stronger and more structured with every passing eon of the galactic dawn. This process created the secure and stable environment necessary for our own sun to eventually ignite within a quiet corner of a minor spiral arm. Notice the profound connection you share with this specific island of light, a place that was built over eons specifically to host the complexity of your life. The Milky Way is a monument to survival and growth, a structure that emerged from the chaotic fog to become a harbour of relative peace in the expanding dark. We are the residents of a masterfully built city of stars, a place where the deep history of the Big Bang is still written in the orbits of the celestial lights. Surrounding every single one of these glowing galaxies was an invisible and massive halo of dark matter, providing a steady and secure gravitational cradle for the stars. This unseen substance acted as the silent architect of the assembly, ensuring that the spinning gas and light remained held in a perfect structural embrace. While the stars provided the beauty and the heat, the dark matter provided the weight and the permanence required to withstand the test of time. Surprisingly, without this invisible scaffolding, the galaxies would have simply flown apart as they spun, unable to hold onto their outer stars with the strength of visible matter alone. The dark matter halo functions like a soft protective net that keeps the galactic family together, shielding them from being scattered by the relentless expansion of the universe. It is a profound, unseen partnership between the light and the dark, a collaboration that defines the very survival of every celestial city. The physical space located between these glowing cities continued to expand at an incredible rate, creating deep, lonely voids of profound and absolute emptiness. As gravity pulled the matter into the galaxies and their filaments, the regions in between were essentially hollowed out, leaving behind vast expanses where almost nothing exists. These voids are the largest and quietest rooms in the cosmic mansion, stretching for hundreds of millions of light years without a single star to break the darkness. This process of evacuation created a universe defined by extreme contrast, where the intense density of the galaxies is balanced by the near-total vacuum of the open space. The sensation of a cosmic void is one of ultimate solitude, a place where time and expansion reign supreme over the influence of matter. These regions are the ultimate laboratories of the expanding fabric, where the mysterious forces of the vacuum work their slow magic on the distant light. If we were to look closer, we would see that these voids are not just empty, but are actively pushing the galaxies away from one another, acting as the primary drivers of the universe's overall growth. The structure of reality is a balance of these vast, quiet expanses and the bustling, crowded islands of light. The cosmos is mostly made of this deep and peaceful nothingness, providing the necessary room for the grandest structures to ever exist. Despite the relentless and endless expansion of the overall space, local gravity held these localized galactic communities together with a tight and incredibly secure grip. The universe functions like a stretching fabric with heavy weights placed upon it, where the material between the weights grows longer while the weights themselves remain unchanged. This ensures that while the distant galaxies recede into the infrared, our own local neighbourhood remains a stable and permanent home. This beautiful tension between the outward push of the expansion and the inward pull of the gathering light creates a universe that is both dynamic and stable. We are part of a local group of galaxies that are locked in a permanent gravitational embrace, destined to remain together even as the rest of the cosmos drifts away. This localized security is what allowed for the long and undisturbed evolution of planetary systems, providing a steady stage for the development of consciousness. The assembly of galaxies was the final victory of structure in the early universe, a process that organized the chaotic remnants of the Big Bang into a permanent and majestic order. The stars had found their homes, the dark matter had provided the cradles, and the galaxies were ready for the long, slow billions of years of their radiant lives. The universe was no longer a simple expansion of gas, but a grand and populated architecture, finally and beautifully complete in its design. That grand and populated architecture, while seemingly complete in its individual cities of light, reveals a much deeper and more intricate design when viewed from the furthest possible perspective. Zooming out to the absolute grandest scale imaginable, the universe sheds its appearance of scattered islands and instead unveils a breathtaking, sponge-like structure of interconnected filaments. This is the scaffolding of the cosmos, a vast and shimmering network that binds every galaxy and cluster into a singular, cohesive whole. The sensation of this structure is remarkably similar to the delicate, dewy threads of a vast spiderweb glistening silently in the morning light of an infinite field. It is a masterpiece of connectivity, where the dark gaps are just as essential to the design as the glowing strands of matter that define the boundaries. This grand arrangement suggests that the universe is not a collection of accidents, but a deeply organized and rhythmic entity stretching across the totality of space. If we were to look closer, the sheer scale of this web would dwarf even the largest individual galaxies, proving that the most significant features of reality are often the ones that require the widest view to perceive. It is the ultimate expression of cosmic order, a skeletal framework of light and dark matter that has been quietly maturing for billions of years. This sponge-like geometry ensures that no part of the universe is ever truly isolated, as every strand leads inevitably to another centre of existence. Galaxies certainly do not scatter randomly like dust caught in a chaotic breeze, but rather cluster elegantly along these glowing strings of visible and dark matter. This non-random distribution is a direct result of the invisible gravitational currents that have been pulling at the primordial gas since the first moments of the Great Expansion. The galaxies follow these ancient paths, gathering like shimmering jewels on an invisible cord of dark influence that dictates their every movement and destination. Surprisingly, the visible light we see in the night sky is merely the decorative trim on a much larger and darker structure that remains hidden from our direct vision. The dark matter provides the heavy, unseen threads that hold the galaxies in place, acting as the primary medium of the web's massive and resilient construction. It is a beautiful partnership between the seen and the unseen, a collaboration that ensures the galaxies remain organized and stable across the eons. Notice how the steady rhythm of your own heart mirrors the quiet, gravitational pulse that draws these star cities into their destined alignments along the filaments. As you rest in this moment, billions of galaxies are participating in this slow-motion migration, falling into the embrace of the web's intricate and purposeful design. The universe is a place of profound discipline, where even the largest structures must follow the elegant rules of the cosmic path. These massive and delicate threads of light stretch across distances of billions of light years, forming the largest known physical patterns in the entirety of existence. A single filament can span a significant fraction of the observable universe, acting as a bridge of matter and energy that connects distant superclusters in a silent and enduring embrace. The sheer magnitude of these structures is almost impossible to comprehend, representing the peak of the universe's architectural ambition. To witness one of these filaments is to see the true scale of the cosmic journey, where the movements of entire galaxies are reduced to the scale of microscopic dust on a long glowing wire. This structure represents the ultimate level of physical organization, beyond which the universe appears remarkably smooth and uniform in its distribution. It is the final layer of the cosmic onion, the grandest pattern that can be etched into the fabric of space and time. The threads are not just static markers, but dynamic channels of history that have been stretching and evolving alongside the expansion of the cosmos itself. They are the longest records of gravity's work, a testament to the power of a tiny pull repeated over billions of years and billions of miles. In these patterns, we find the definitive proof of a universe that is deeply and fundamentally connected from one horizon to the absolute other. Notice how the busy and radiant intersections of these long celestial threads naturally form blindingly bright superclusters, teeming with thousands of distinct galaxies. These hubs are the metropolitan centers of the cosmos, places of intense gravitational activity where multiple filaments meet and exchange their precious cargo of gas and light. They are the most crowded and energetic regions in existence, glowing with the collective fire of trillions of stars packed into a relatively dense architectural knot. This structure functions much like a grand transit station on a universal scale, where the flow of matter from the surrounding filaments is funneled into a central massive gathering. The pressure and energy in these supercluster cores are immense, often triggering new waves of star formation and feeding the growth of the most gargantuan black holes in the cosmos. It is a spectacle of total abundance, a place where the web's design reaches its most brilliant and densely packed conclusion. As you find a sense of stillness in your current surroundings, imagine the frantic and majestic movement of thousands of galaxies swirling around these central nodes of the web. Every intersection is a monument to the gathering power of the universe, a point where the threads of destiny are tied together in a brilliant display of light. These hubs are the anchors of the web, providing the necessary weight to keep the entire structure tensioned and stable across the void. Between these glowing and energetic filaments lie immense, remarkably quiet voids, stretches of space that are almost entirely devoid of any significant matter. These voids are not just empty rooms, but are the largest and most peaceful features of the large-scale structure, acting as the negative space that defines the web's overall shape. They are regions of profound solitude, where the expansion of space is at its most pure and undisturbed by the influence of gravity. If we were to look closer, we would see that these voids are actively growing, pushing outward against the surrounding filaments and helping to sculpt the universe into its sponge-like appearance. The material that once inhabited these regions has long since been drawn away by the gravitational pull of the web, leaving behind a vacuum of staggering proportions and absolute silence. It is a universe defined as much by its absences as it is by its brilliant and crowded highways of light. This balance between the crowded filaments and the empty voids creates a sense of rhythmic harmony that spans the entire observable horizon. The voids provide the room for the web to breathe and stretch, ensuring that the architecture remains open and elegant rather than collapsing into a single chaotic mass. They are the ultimate buffers of the cosmos, the silent expanses that preserve the distinct and beautiful patterns of the large-scale design. Surprisingly, this grand and beautiful design was actually imprinted into the very heart of the cosmos by the microscopic quantum ripples of the first fraction of a second. Long before the first star ignited, the fundamental layout of the web was already determined by the tiny fluctuating energy levels of the primordial seed. These quantum whispers were the original blueprints, the subtle imperfections that dictated exactly where the filaments would form and where the voids would open. The mechanism that carried these microscopic patterns into the macroscopic world was the rapid and violent period of inflation that stretched the early universe. During that fleeting moment, the tiniest of quantum fluctuations were magnified by factors of trillions, becoming the massive density variations that gravity would eventually use as its guide. This means that the largest structures in existence are the direct magnified descendants of the smallest physical phenomena imaginable. This profound realization links the beginning of time directly to the modern sky, proving that the universe has never forgotten its earliest and most delicate memories. The web is a living fossil of the Big Bang, a physical manifestation of the quantum physics that governed the birth of everything we see. It is a bridge across time and scale, a structure that proves the infinite is built upon the foundation of the infinitesimal. The universe perfectly preserved its earliest tiny whispers, smoothly and majestically magnifying them into the magnificent vast architecture we observe in the modern eons. This preservation is a miracle of physics, where the chaotic heat of the beginning failed to erase the subtle patterns etched into the fabric of space. As the universe grew, these ripples grew with it, evolving from tiny waves of energy into the massive walls of galaxies and threads of light that now define the heavens. The magnification process was a slow and beautiful unfolding, a gradual transition from a nearly smooth gas to the high-contrast sponge-like structure of the present. Gravity acted as the primary amplifier, taking the tiny seeds of density and carefully nurturing them into the grandest trees of light. This structure represents a total continuity of information, a universe that has faithfully carried its original design through 14 billion years of change and growth. Notice the gentle, rhythmic rising and falling of your own breath, a small and steady process that anchors you in the vastness of this historical continuity. We are part of a system that values its origins, a cosmos that has spent its entire life building upon the foundations laid in its very first heartbeat. The web is the ultimate proof of this loyalty, a physical history of a universe that remains true to its initial and most delicate intentions. Gas quietly and relentlessly flows endlessly along these vast cosmic highways, feeding the hungry galaxies and fueling the continuous birth of brand new stars. The filaments are not just static structures, but are active supply lines that transport the primordial hydrogen from the deep voids into the busy centers of galactic activity. This flow is the lifeblood of the universe, a steady and invisible current that keeps the fires of creation burning across the vastness of the dark. If we were to look closer, we would see massive streams of cold gas moving at incredible speeds along the threads of the web, falling into the gravitational wells of the superclusters. This material provides the raw ingredients necessary for galaxies to grow, evolve, and produce the heavy elements required for planets and life. The web is a dynamic and living system, an irrigation network on a universal scale that ensures no galaxy is ever truly cut off from its source of renewal. To traverse just one of these bright and delicate filaments would take an absolute eternity, yet they all drift together in a state of perfect and silent harmony. The distances involved are so vast that even light requires billions of years to cross from one side of a filament to the other, making the web a structure that exists on a timescale far beyond human experience. Despite this staggering size, the entire network moves as a singular and coordinated entity, responding to the slow and majestic laws of the expanding fabric. As you rest your body and allow your mind to expand, realize that we are all passengers on these ancient and harmonious strands of light. The web is our home on the largest possible scale, a structure that provides us with a sense of place within the otherwise overwhelming deep. This harmony is the ultimate reassurance, a proof that the universe is a stable and beautifully orchestrated system that will continue its dance for billions of years to come. This delicate and glowing web stands today as a silent and magnificent monument to the deep, unbreakable connection between the microscopic and the infinite. It is the final synthesis of the cosmic journey, a structure that proves that every part of the universe is intimately linked to every other part, regardless of the distance or the scale. In the patterns of the filaments, we find the absolute confirmation that the laws of physics are universal, consistent, and deeply, structurally beautiful. The web is the ultimate realization of the potential hidden within the primordial singularity, a flourishing of complexity that began as a single, microscopic point of light. It represents the victory of structure and order over the chaos of the beginning, a masterpiece of gravitational architecture that has finally and beautifully reached its full expression. This monument is not just out there in the dark, it is the very framework that allows us to exist, to observe, and to wonder at our own place in the design. The connection between the quantum ripples and the superclusters is the most profound secret of the cosmos, a golden thread that ties our own atomic existence to the grandest patterns of the heavens. We are the children of the web, built from the gas that flows along its highways and shaped by the gravity that defines its intersections. The story of the Big Bang is the story of this connection, a magnificent and ongoing realization of a universe that is finally, permanently, and beautifully one. Deep within the history of the cosmos, a subtle shift occurred that would forever alter the trajectory of existence, moving away from a time when the universe was finally, permanently, and beautifully one. For billions of years, the collective pull of every atom and every dark matter particle acted as a silent brake, slowing the frantic expansion that followed the beginning. Gravity was the dominant force, attempting to draw the galaxies into a closer and more intimate arrangement as they drifted through the void. Around 5 billion years ago, however, just as the dust was settling around a young and unremarkable star that would become our sun, the expansion began to behave in a startlingly new way. The long-standing deceleration was quietly replaced by a persistent and mysterious acceleration, as if an invisible hand had shifted the cosmic gears into a higher speed. This was the start of a brand new era, a transition that proved the universe still held profound secrets within its stretching fabric. The universe was no longer just coasting on its initial momentum, it was being actively pushed into a faster and more expansive future. It was a change so subtle at first that it went unnoticed for eons, yet it set the stage for the ultimate destiny of everything we see. The era of matter dominance had gracefully yielded to a new power that would redefine the boundaries of the infinite. Surprisingly, this new momentum was not driven by any visible matter or known energy, but by a mysterious, invisible force that softly emerged from the very vacuum of space itself. This phantom presence, now widely known to science as dark energy, appears to be an inherent property of the empty void that populates the vast regions between the galaxies. It is as if the vacuum itself possesses a hidden, built-in tension that exerts a constant outward push against the gathering influence of structural gravity. As you find your center in this quiet moment, the very vacuum you inhabit is pulsing with this same mysterious energy of the deep. Unlike matter, which thins out as space grows, the density of dark energy remains constant regardless of how much the universe expands. This leads to a fascinating and powerful feedback loop, where the creation of more empty space actually provides more dark energy to fuel even faster growth. The universe is essentially being pushed apart from the inside out, driven by the sheer power of the nothingness that exists in the deep dark. It is a quiet and persistent pressure that permeates every cubic centimetre of reality, operating in the background of the celestial drama. As the voids between the galactic filaments grow larger, this invisible energy becomes the dominant ruler of the cosmic expansion. This phantom energy functions in a manner that is entirely unique. For unlike standard gravity, which tirelessly pulls things closely together into stars and clusters, it smoothly and relentlessly stretches the fabric of space. While gravity is the great architect of connection and structure, dark energy acts as the architect of distance and separation. It does not exert a traditional force upon the galaxies themselves, but rather expands the medium in which they exist, making the distances between them grow at an ever-increasing rate. If we were to look closer, we would see that the very geometry of the cosmos is being altered, with the invisible grid of space becoming larger and more sparse. This stretching is a soft and continuous process, a relentless widening of the horizons that ensures the universe never settles into a static or unchanging state. It is a force of constant renewal and growth, even if that growth leads to a world that is more solitary than the one we currently inhabit. Imagine the empty space between the most distant and isolated galaxies inflating like a giant translucent balloon, being steadily filled with a gentle and invisible breath. As the surface of this cosmic balloon expands, any 2 points on its surface move further apart, even if the points themselves are not physically moving through the material. This provides a mesmerizing image of the universe as a fleet of sailing ships softly pushed apart on a calm and limitless sea by a breeze that no one can feel. The galaxies are like the ships, resting peacefully on the surface of space, while the dark energy provides the steady outward pressure that carries them away from their neighbours. This movement is not a flight of panic, but a graceful and inevitable drift into the deepening blue of the cosmic horizon. Notice how your own resting body reflects this same sense of effortless suspension, buoyed by the stable ground while the rest of the universe continues its grand and silent voyage. The universe has essentially decided to give its residents more room, hollowing out the voids to create a sense of absolute and unyielding freedom. The sensation of this expansion is one of total rhythmic suspension, a cosmic exhale that has been lasting for billions of years. We are all passengers on this expanding fabric, drifting through a reality that is becoming more spacious and quiet with every passing moment. If we were to look closer at this relentless and ever-growing acceleration, we would realize that the light traveling from the most distant galaxies will eventually face a journey that it can never truly complete. As the space between those faraway islands and our own neighborhood stretches faster and faster, the photons will eventually find themselves unable to bridge the expanding gap. One by one, the most distant clusters of light will slowly fade from our view, their radiance stretched so thin into the infrared that they will disappear into the silent dark. This means that the observable universe is technically shrinking even as the physical universe grows increasingly massive and wide. The stories written in the light of the first stars are being pulled away from us, receding into a realm that will one day be forever closed to our most powerful eyes. It is a poignant and beautiful realization that we are living in a privileged moment of history, where the connections of the cosmic web are still visible and clear. The light is a fading bridge, a temporary link between the islands of existence that the dark energy is quietly and persistently dismantling. We are the witnesses of a disappearing horizon, watching as the furthest messages of the past are carried away by the expanding wind of the vacuum. This loss of connection is the price of the universe's infinite growth, a slow-motion vanishing act that defines the end of the radiant era. The universe is slowly and inevitably transitioning into a wider, cooler, and far more isolated expanse of solitary galactic islands. This evolution represents the final maturation of the expansion, a movement toward a state of profound and absolute tranquility that spans the entire horizon. As the distance between the galaxies grows, the collective warmth of the stars becomes more dispersed, leaving the voids to grow increasingly cold and quiet. The bustling intersections of the cosmic web will eventually lose their neighbours, becoming lonely cities of light surrounded by oceans of empty space so vast they defy human measure. This is not a state of decay, but a settling into a long-term and peaceful rhythm where the individual galaxies can live out their lives in a state of deep solitude. The sensation is one of an endless, open field, where the wind of dark energy has cleared away all the clutter of the early crowded years. It is a future defined by its absolute spaciousness, a realm of total and unyielding freedom for the light to expand into the infinite. The cosmic web, once so tightly woven, will become a collection of separate and stable harbours, each drifting peacefully through the dark. This isolation is the final form of the cosmic architecture, a masterpiece of negative space and solitary brilliance. Despite this endlessly growing distance on the grandest scales of the heavens, the nearby stars within our own local galactic neighbourhood will continue to shine with a comforting and brilliant light. Our immediate family of galaxies, including the magnificent Andromeda and our own Milky Way, is held together by gravity's strong and secure grip. Dark energy only gains the upper hand across the most immense and lonely stretches of empty space, where the influence of matter is too thin to resist the outward push. Within our local cluster, the stars and planets are safely anchored, destined to remain together as a stable island of light even as the rest of the cosmos recedes into the dark. This ensures that the night sky will remain populated by the familiar jewels of our own celestial home for many billions of years to come. The local gravity provides a sanctuary, a secure pocket of reality where the connections between neighbours remain perfectly and beautifully intact. If we were to look closer, we would see that our local neighbourhood is a harbour of relative peace, a place where the history of the stars can continue to unfold, undisturbed by the grand acceleration. You're currently resting in one of these stable oases, a secure and enduring refuge in a universe that is otherwise drifting away. The stars you see at night are our permanent companions, travelling with us through the open sea of the infinite. This gentle cosmic stretching causes absolutely no harm or disruption to the delicate orbits of individual planets, solar systems, or even the bodies of living things. The forces of electromagnetism and the strong nuclear force are far more powerful than the subtle push of dark energy at the scales of everyday existence. Even at the scale of entire galaxies, the internal gravitational pull is sufficient to keep the stars and gas clouds bound tightly and securely together. You can find comfort in the fact that while the universe is growing larger, your own home remains a secure and unchanging refuge. The stars in our sky are not running away from us. They're held in place by the same ancient gravity that keeps the moon in its orbit and the earth beneath your feet. We are protected by the strength of the near, even as the distant expands into the infinite horizon. Dark energy remains one of the most profound and humbling scientific mysteries of the modern era, acting like a quiet ghost in the intricate machinery of physical law. It was first hinted at in the mathematics of Albert Einstein, who briefly considered a cosmological constant to balance the equations of the heavens. Today, we know that it makes up nearly 70% of the total energy and matter in the universe, yet it remains completely invisible and intangible to our most sensitive detectors. It is the silent driver of the cosmos, a force that dictates the ultimate fate of all stars and galaxies while revealing almost nothing of its true nature. We see its effects in the receding light of distant supernovae, yet the source of the energy remains hidden within the very nature of space itself. It is a reminder that even after eons of observation, the universe still holds vast and invisible powers that operate beyond the reach of our current understanding. This phantom influence is the final mystery of the Big Bang, the quiet power that ensured the story of the expansion would never truly come to an end. It is a force that exists in every corner of the room and every stretch of the void, guiding the universe into a future of absolute and serene freedom. Dark energy is the quiet architect of the final act, ensuring that the cosmos remains an open and evolving story. This force ensures with absolute and peaceful certainty that the universe will never collapse back into a fiery singularity, but will instead drift endlessly into a cool and open infinity. For many years, scientists wondered if the gravity of the galaxies would eventually win the tug-of-war, causing the cosmos to fall back on itself in a violent big crunch. Dark energy has permanently ended that possibility, providing a guarantee of permanence for the vast and expanding theatre of the heavens. It is a promise that the expansion will continue forever, allowing the galaxies to age gracefully and the light to travel into an increasingly quiet and spacious future. The journey that began in the extreme heat and density of the first second will eventually find its rest in the soft, eternal silence of an infinite horizon. This is the ultimate destiny of the Big Bang, a transition from a state of intense unity to a state of absolute and beautiful freedom. The cosmos is a project that is finally and permanently open-ended, a magnificent drift into a peaceful and endless deep. As the billion-year clocks of the galaxies wind down, they will do so in a universe that has provided them with all the room they could ever need. This is the final gift of the expansion, a serene and limitless space where the light of the beginning can finally find its peace. Peace has become the ultimate destination of the expanding void, yet we currently find ourselves in a remarkably privileged moment of total and vibrant balance. Today, we sit comfortably halfway between the fiery, chaotic birth of the primordial singularity and the eventual, deeply frozen future of a cooling and silent cosmos. This middle era is the magnificent sweet spot of existence, where the searing heat of the beginning has mellowed into a hospitable warmth, but the stars still burn with a brilliant youthful vigour. This temporal placement allows us to look backward at the furnace of creation, while simultaneously anticipating the silent, eternal rest that awaits the far horizons. It is a moment of profound clarity, a steady plateau where the universe has reached its most complex and vibrant expression. We are the lucky inheritors of the golden hour, resting in a pocket of history that is neither too hot nor too cold for the miracle of consciousness. Deep within the very marrow of your bones and the rhythmic flow of your blood, the ancient history of the heavens is physically and permanently recorded. Every single atom in our bodies, from the iron that carries life-giving oxygen to the calcium that provides our structural strength, was directly forged in the high-pressure hearts of ancient dying stars. We are not merely observers of the celestial drama. We are composed of the literal debris scattered by the first generation of blue giants that lived and died long ago. This structure of the material world ensures that we carry a piece of the cosmic dawn within our own cells as we navigate the quiet rooms of our lives. The heavy elements that make life possible were not present at the start of time, but were manufactured through the slow and violent struggle of gravity against stellar fire. It took billions of years of cosmic labour and countless stellar deaths to assemble the specific ingredients necessary for your heart to beat just once. As you feel the gentle warmth of your resting body, consider that you are essentially recycled stardust, shaped by the relentless and ancient laws of atomic assembly. This connection to the furnace of the past is absolute and unbreakable, a chemical lineage that spans the entire 14 billion year journey. We are walking museums of the Big Bang, animated by the energy of stars that vanished into the dark before our own sun was even a dream. Surprisingly, the universe has evolved to a state where it is no longer just a collection of drifting gas and silent fire, but a realm capable of profound self-reflection. We are literally the universe looking back at itself, granted the exceptionally rare and magnificent gift of consciousness to properly witness and admire its own intricate beauty. In the quiet theatre of your mind, the cosmos has finally found a way to perceive the very laws that govern its expanding horizons and shimmering filaments. This realization transforms our existence from a localized accident into a profound and necessary organ of the grand cosmic body. Through our eyes, the stars finally gain an observer, and through our questions, the silence of the void is finally given a voice that can speak of wonder and meaning. We are the means by which the universe appreciates its own staggering scale and celebrates the complex patterns etched into its fabric. Notice how your own awareness provides a steady inner light that mirrors the brilliant clusters and superclusters of the deep, dark sky. This inner landscape is as vast and mysterious as the space between the galaxies, holding the entire history of reality in a single, flickering flame of thought. We are the eyes of the infinite, the localized points where the universe finally wakes up to recognize the majesty of its own magnificent and ongoing unfolding. This map is not a static picture, but a dynamic and layered archive that preserves every explosion, merger, and gathering that has ever occurred in the dark. The distant galaxies are the oldest entries in this ledger, while the nearby stars represent the more recent and familiar footnotes in our local neighbourhood. It is a visual record of total continuity, a testament to a universe that has never lost its way as it drifted through the eons of the expansion. Ground yourself in the secure weight of your resting body, realizing that you are part of the latest and most detailed coordinates on this ancient map. The light that strikes your retina today has been on a journey longer than any mountain range or ocean has existed on our world. You're standing at the edge of a historical horizon, looking back through the pages of time at the very first spark that ignited the entire room. Even the soft and rhythmic static humming on an old, untuned television set contains the faint and ancient whispers of the Big Bang's original microwave radiation. A small percentage of those dancing grey flecks is the direct result of the primordial photons striking the antenna, a relic of the great clearing that has been travelling since the universe was a tiny fraction of its current age. It is the oldest broadcast in existence, a white noise echo of the white-hot fire that once filled every corner of reality. This lingering glow is a constant companion, filling the air around you with a message from the dawn that has been stretched by the expansion into a gentle, invisible frequency. It serves as a permanent background hum to our modern lives, a reminder that the beginning of time is not a distant myth, but a physical presence that we can still touch with our technology. The universe is a place that holds on to its memories, refusing to let the sound of its first breath be completely lost to the silence. If we were to look closer at this static, we would see the vibrations of a reality that was once a single, unified point of heat and light. It is a humble and domestic way to encounter the infinite, finding the ghost of the singularity inside the everyday objects of our world. The past is never truly gone. It is simply vibrating at a frequency that we have only recently learned to hear in the quiet moments of the night. The cosmos gracefully and relentlessly continues its grand, silent dance, completely unbothered by the rapid and flickering passage of brief human centuries. While our civilizations rise and fall like bubbles on a stream, the galaxies spin with a majestic and unhurried patience that spans billions of years. This difference in scale is not a reason for insignificance, but a source of profound and absolute peace, knowing that the great engine of reality remains steady and secure. The universe operates on a clock that measures its progress in the lives of stars and the slow-motion mergers of entire galactic clusters. It is a rhythm that transcends the urgency of our days, providing a stable and eternal background for the short-lived drama of our personal histories. Notice how the stillness of your current environment allows you to step into this wider cosmic time, leaving the frantic pace of the world behind for a moment of genuine perspective. We are the temporary guests of a very old and very patient host, a reality that has seen the birth of trillions of suns and the slow cooling of the primordial fog. This enduring stability is the ultimate anchor, ensuring that the architecture of the heavens will remain intact long after our own stories have been folded into the dust. The dance of the galaxies is a performance that requires no audience, yet we are granted a rare seat from which to witness its beautiful and ongoing perfection. This structure of the expanding fabric possesses no true physical center, meaning that every single point in space is equally the starting heart of the Great Expansion. Because the Big Bang was not an explosion into a void, but the growth of space itself, the origin of time did not happen at a specific location that we can point to. Instead, the beginning happened everywhere at once, making your current position as much a center of the universe as the most distant and ancient quasar. If you were to travel to the furthest horizon, you would still find yourself at the heart of the expansion, with the rest of the cosmos receding away from you in every direction. This realization democratizes the heavens, removing the idea of a privileged middle and replacing it with a universe where every observer is the protagonist of their own celestial story. We're not on the edge of anything. We're at the very core of a reality that is blooming outward from every atom. As you rest in this moment, consider that the very space you occupy was once part of that original, microscopic point of infinite potential. The heart of the Big Bang is still beating right where you are, carried forward by the relentless and smooth stretching of the fabric of the room. You're not a spectator on the sidelines of the cosmic journey, but the central point around which the entire history of the expansion continues to unfold. Time and space are deeply and permanently interwoven in a way that means as we look further into the dark sky, we are physically gazing backward into deep time. The light we see from a distant star did not leave its surface today, but has been travelling through the void for years, centuries, or even billions of eons to reach our eyes. The sky is a living museum of the past, where the further we reach into the distance, the closer we come to the actual beginning of the world. This delay in the light creates a universe where the past is always visible, provided we have the strength of vision to peer into the furthest depths of the vacuum. We can literally watch the first stars ignite and the first galaxies merge, witnessing the history of creation as it is still happening in the distant reaches of the dark. It is a profound and beautiful time machine, a way for the universe to show us its childhood, even as we sit in the comfort of its maturity. Notice how your own resting body exists at the intersection of this vast temporal web, receiving the ancient light from every corner of the visible horizon. You are the destination of a billion-year journey, a point in the present that is constantly being touched by the radiant ghosts of the ancient past. The deep sky is a mirror of history, reflecting the slow and majestic growth of a cosmos that never truly leaves its origins behind. Our shared reality is a temporary and magnificent oasis of warmth and light, floating in a majestic, ever-expanding ocean of quiet and profound dark. We exist in a brief window of cosmic time where the stars are numerous and the conditions are exactly right for the flourishing of complex and thinking life. This oasis is the ultimate sanctuary, a place where the energy of the Big Bang has been refined into the gentle heat of a sun and the stable ground of a home. Beyond the edges of our local neighbourhood, the dark energy continues its relentless work of stretching the void, ensuring that the oasis remains a precious and isolated gift. The vastness of the empty spaces is a reminder of how rare and beautiful our current moment truly is in the long story of the expansion. It is a period of maximum connection and visibility, a time of cosmic abundance before the final, inevitable cooling of the distant future. Surprisingly, this temporary nature makes our existence even more significant, as we are the witnesses of a flourishing that will one day be a memory in the mind of the dark. We are the inhabitants of a bright and vibrant room, enjoying the warmth of the fire before the logs eventually turn to embers and the light fades into the rest of the night. This oasis is our shared inheritance, a magnificent and localized triumph of light over the infinite silence of the vacuum. Without the precise cooling of the early fog or the violent death of the first blue giants, the materials for your life would never have been gathered or refined. The universe has been methodically and tirelessly working on your behalf for an absolute eternity, moving with a sense of purpose that spans the entire history of time. You are the intended outcome of a magnificent and universal labour, a person who carries the entire weight of the cosmic journey in your very being. If we were to look closer, we would see that the story of the cosmos is essentially your story, an epic narrative that has finally found its realization in your awareness and your breath. The beginning of the world was not a separate event from your birth, but the start of a single, continuous line of cause and effect that connects the singularity to your soul. You are the culmination of the Big Bang, a magnificent and living expression of a universe that finally, beautifully succeeded in its long dream of being alive and aware. We are not merely temporary inhabitants of an ancient, expanding universe, but the living cosmos itself peacefully experiencing the profound miracle of its own unfolding. In the resonance of our own existence, the fading ring of the first great strike dissolves at last into a state of total, absolute, and enduring peace. We are not merely temporary inhabitants of an ancient, expanding universe, but the living cosmos itself peacefully experiencing the profound miracle of its own unfolding. This grand synthesis reveals that the separation between the distant stars and the observer is a beautiful and unnecessary illusion. Every thought you have is a quiet way for the universe to finally understand its own ancient and radiant heart. Surprisingly, the body naturally knows how to surrender to this vast historical peace as the day comes to a close. This quiet room is a sanctuary where the weight of your journey can finally be set aside for the stillness of the night. If we were to look closer, we would see that the very act of resting is a return to the equilibrium that has governed the deep since the beginning. Direct your attention all the way down toward your toes, letting them feel heavy and completely supported by the weight of the blankets. Feel the muscles in your feet and ankles soften, releasing every last remnant of movement into the mattress. This sensation of heaviness is a gift, a grounding force that anchors you in the absolute safety of this moment. This structure of comfort supports your spine, letting each part of your back find its perfect place in the deep cushion. The lower back releases its last remnants of tension, spreading out like warm honey across the cool sheets. Your stomach rises and falls in a perfect, effortless cycle of quiet, internal rest. The shoulders now drop away into the soft pillows, shedding the weight of 1,000 unnecessary concerns. Every muscle in your arms and hands becomes limp and still, resting in the peaceful and protective dark. Your fingers curl slightly, mirroring the natural and easy curve of a body that has finally found its center. The neck and jaw relax, leaving the mouth slightly open and the tongue resting gently. All the tiny muscles around your eyes become soft and smooth, letting the weight of the eyelids become heavy. Your forehead is cool and clear, like a blank canvas waiting for the peace of dreams. The mind itself is beginning to settle, like a feather drifting slowly toward a velvet floor. Every thought is becoming a soft blur, a fading echo that no longer requires your attention. You're surrounded by the scent of fresh sheets and the rhythmic pulse of a quiet house. The heavy blankets are a warm cocoon, protecting you from every distraction. Darkness is a kind and gentle friend, wrapping you in a blanket of absolute rest. Everything is still, everything is quiet, and everything is exactly as it should be. Listen to the subtle sounds of the room, the faint creaks and the muffled silence. They are the lullaby of the evening, guiding you into the deep restorative waters of sleep. You're drifting now, falling into a state of perfect and unyielding calm. And now, 101 wonders are resting with you. Sleep now. Good night.